listening to the radio program Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. I'm Tim Wildman with Ed Vitagliano, and our next guest, Ed, is
Pamela Geller. She's founder, editor, and publisher of AtlasShrugs.com, and she's author of the book Stop the Islamization of America. And she's written a column for Breitbart titled The Jihad. Jihad Comes to Boston. Pamela, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Tim and Ed.
Thank you, Pam. Tim here, and that's Ed. Tell us about your organization first.
The American Freedom Defense Initiative is a human rights organization dedicated to freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and individual rights. The premise of America, essentially.
Well, now you have been, I know I've seen you on other programs. You've been on our programs here in American Family Radio. I've read some of your articles that you've written, and you are very concerned. I mentioned the name of the book that you've written, Stop the Islamization of America. You're very concerned with the gains that jihadists have made worldwide, of course, but also in America. And I think a lot of people go, oh, wait a second, Islamists in America, how can that be? But that is one of your great concerns, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And one only has to look at the scores of thwarted jihadist attacks almost on a weekly basis to not be concerned. Clearly the media does scrub and sanitize the jihad threat. I mean, you see it every single time we either thwart an attack or there is an attack. Here in Boston, they tried to say that the immigrant experience or some such nonsense, when in fact these jihadists, in their own words, claim to be operational and committing jihad. I'm sure you saw the letter that was released last week by the younger brother of the two Boston jihadists, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who said, that he envied his brother because his brother had met Allah and he praised Allah, and this was in defense of Islam, and so on and so forth. And even with the Fort Hood jihadi, who was, wearing the garb of the Shaheed on the day, the Shaheed is the suicide, the martyr, on the day of his jihad, who was giving out Qurans on the morning of his jihad, who was screaming Allahu Akbar as he mowed down our unarmed soldiers at Fort Hood. President Obama has deemed that workplace violence. So there is a disconnect between reality and this fantasist's idea, this delusion that we'd like to believe, but you can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. And these countermeasures that the Obama administration has taken, and what I mean by countermeasures is the removal of jihad and Islam from all counterterrorism materials and manuals. This dismantling of counterterror programs, we're beginning to see the poisonous fruits of that very dangerous policy.
Let me ask you this. We're talking to Pamela Geller on the program. What is your website? AtlasShrugs.com. You can get to it from PamelaGeller.com as well. I want to ask you, if you could get President Obama, in a one-on-one interview, and maybe an interview, and it was off the record, okay? And so this would not be made public, but you could ask him, I'm just curious what you think the answer is to this question. You could ask him, Mr. President, why did you and your administration intentionally ignore what's blatantly clear to everyone else about jihadism, Islamic radicals, their motivation for doing this, and you won't even talk about it publicly? If he could answer you and he wouldn't be put on the record, what do you think he would say?
Well, I think he would dissemble, and I think he would deceive me. I don't think I would ask him a question
even
like that.
Even if you gave him truth serum?
Oh, if I gave him truth, that's something else. I mean, look, he's Islamophiliac. I mean,
he's a what?
he's Islamophilic. He favors Islam.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that explains it. That's part of the explanation. Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. I mean, look, he did grow up in a Muslim country from the ages of 6 to 12. He grew up in Indonesia, the largest Muslim country. He studied Quran at his school. He studied Islam. He told Nicholas Kristof that the prettiest sound he ever heard was the Muslim call to prayer at sunset. He was born, as you know, his father was a Muslim, and under Islam, that makes you a Muslim. His stepfather, who adopted him, was a Muslim. I'm not saying he's a Muslim. I'm saying he's Islamophilic. I would ask him more definitive questions. I would ask him, where were you on the night of Benghazi? That's what I would want to know. I don't think I would let him slither out of the answer. I mean, to ask him a question, why do you obfuscate on jihad? He would say, oh, I don't, and, he would do his Obama thing that he does so well. But I want concrete answers to certain questions.
I understand. But you're saying that if you got to the root of his motivation and the secular left in this country's hesitancy to admit the truth, the obvious about Islamic jihadism, because they don't even want to call it that.
All right.
You would say at least President Obama is. If he's not a Muslim himself, you said you didn't know, or you said he wasn't. I don't. He doesn't.
Let me say this. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
I mean, I'm not concerned
He's
with
a sympathizer.
My question is, if he was, or if he is, or if he isn't, what would he be doing differently?
For all practical purposes, he is, because he is sympathizing with their movement because he's not wanting to be critical of it. I'm talking about the jihad.
He's sympathetic to Islam overall.
Yes, excuse me. I'm going to rephrase that. He's sympathetic to Islam.
Yes.
So he doesn't want to criticize Muslims, even if and attach a doctrine like jihad, which is clear that many Muslims, by many I mean numbers, maybe not percentage of the Muslim community, millions adopt this jihad. You know what? I was listening. It just brings up one other thing. I was listening the other day to Sean Hannity, and he had a guy on who was saying, this just shows you, I'm going to demonstrate something here. He had a caller, and his caller said, well, my brother-in-law is a Muslim, but he's not a radical. And Sean Hannity said, what do you mean, how did he feel about Boston? Well, he just said, America's chickens are coming home to roost. And the segment kind of closed out. The music was on, so the interview was, the call was over. But what I'm saying is, this fella who was calling said his brother-in-law was not a radical. In other words, I guess he meant he wouldn't personally go out and commit acts of jihad. But he was saying he was a Muslim, and a lot of Muslims feel like, well, America's chickens
are coming.
We're
getting what we deserve.
We're getting what we deserve
by someone blowing up.
Yes.
Killing innocent people at the Boston Marathon.
And Pamela, that's frightening.
Well, it's frightening if you've been misinformed or misled as the American people have. I mean, look, there was nothing in 2001 that you could point to, but it was jihad then, it's jihad now. Of course, the left loves to blame America. This is what they do. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm not surprised that the leftist media is aligned with the jihad force. It is a pattern on the left to always align itself with whatever totalitarian ideology there is of the day, whether it's communism or Stalinism, or even the National Socialist Workers' Party, which was Nazism. And so there's no system of governance that's more controlling of the people than the Sharia. And this is what the left loves. The left loves to control the people. The battle, whether it's communism or statism or Nazism or Islam, the battle is individualism versus collectivism. That's the eternal struggle, by the way. It may take on different cloaks and different costumes, but this is the eternal human struggle. And the problem, of course, is under Islam, there is no such thing as a unique soul. There is no such thing as individual rights. And so this is truly the battle.
But it's being promoted by the secular left in America.
Yes.
Who say they're for civil rights.
They think they'll win. They think that they can use this, so that they'll forge this alliance to control the people, and then they'll think they'll win. Look, the left has been notorious in its slaughter. Look at Stalin. I mean, on his deathbed, he admitted to over 20 million. We have seen well over 100 million slaughtered under communism the past century. So, these are two vicious ideologies.
But, yeah, to have the secular left, which says they're for civil liberties and advancing human rights and those things that they say they champion, being uncritical of a religious dogma that is the most oppressive in the world, they want to bash. I don't understand why the secular left.
Well, they probably don't think that jihad actually poses a threat to America. If they actually thought, I just have to believe that they're not that stupid. That if they actually believed that Sharia law was going to be imposed and that reporters would be the first ones with their heads cut off, well, maybe not the first ones, I would have to believe that they would not be sympathetic or uncritical to it. I think they just they like them because they're victims and they hate America, and the journalists hate America, not some of them. And I can't believe they think that Sharia is going to triumph, is it?
We're out of time. Pamela, what's your website again?
AtlasShrugs.com.
Atlas Shrugs?
Yes, Shrugs with an S. Thank you for having me,
You're
gentlemen.
welcome. Thank you, Pamela. Maybe we can explore this.